My lord, the enemies are at the gates. It's the grand battle. This will determine who wins and who loses. Who's with me? Let's go and destroy the enemy once and for all. Yes. Hello and welcome to this episode of How to Be a Great GM. Well, in today's episode, we're looking at the 5 C's of how to make your end game, your final battle, your grand conclusion to your grand campaign that much grander, because it's about to get serious. No, actually, it's about how to make sure that your end game is the most spectacular end game that you can possibly have. Now, excuse me, my fur's rising. Now, the important thing to remember in endgame is that this is the conclusion that your players have been driving for months, for years, however many weeks, etc. of play, how many hundreds of hours they have been playing for. So it's something that they are looking forward to, and it's something that you are under incredible pressure to make sure is up to their standard and it fulfills their need in a way that works. And it's incredibly tricky to get right, to make it satisfactory, because often by the time we've reached the point where we are at endgame, we're either tired of the campaign, we're tired of each other, or there just really isn't much left. So the 5 C's help me, at least, to focus my mind when I'm creating these stories, to focus my mind and say, this is how the game is actually going to end, and this is how we can make it the coolest possible ending that there is. And I use those 5 C's. But before we get there, you need to determine whether or not you actually need a gigantic conclusion. Now, if your game is particularly sandboxy and you don't have a big bad who's been plotting throughout the entire campaign, who's been driving home his evil plans of world domination or her dastardly deeds to take over the kingdom and return all dragons to control the space, etc., 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 if you don't have one of those, if your players have been going from adventure to adventure to adventure to adventure, and they've basically just been doing their own thing without too much interference from major plot lines, you don't really have a master plot, you've got lots of little plots that they explore, then you don't need to have an epic conclusion. However, at that point, you can have a recognition conclusion, if you like. That's the right word, recognition. So your players have been doing their characters have been doing their little adventures and things. Your recognition conclusion could be that the orphans of a town that they've been based in get together and buy them something nice and say thank you for all of their hard work. The local lord equally might thank them for their work, for their extra efforts that they've put in to the whole thing. So it's about recognizing that the players have contributed significantly, and you can have some kind of conclusion such as they have in Star Wars A New Hope. Now I'm going to be referencing the Star Wars movies, A New Hope and Return of the Jedi specifically in this video, because they represent, I think, 2 great examples of 2 different ways of ending a campaign. So in End of A New Hope, the characters are all given medals and given awards. That's recognition. They can be recognized for their contribution. Because if you look at it, there wasn't necessarily a big bad at the end of A New Hope. It was just about destroying the Death Star. So it was a simple conclusion. Here's a medal. Everyone applauds. Game over. Thanks for playing. And I think that that's a really good way of ending a sandbox campaign without it feeling like the players have just stopped. Another thing to look at is, what is your master plot, if you do have a master plot now? What is your master plot and how has it changed over the course of the game? How has it evolved? What have the players done to affect it? How has it come together? Sorry, this thing is riding because I think I'm sitting on it. How has it come together? How have those things contributed to changing your master plot? Now, whatever your master plot has been, ultimately the players now must resolve that master plot. And this is really the focus of the video, is you've been driving to get to this master plot point. How do you now make sure that it is the best that it can possibly be? And by looking at your master plot, looking at how it's twisted, but also reflect back and look on things that haven't been concluded. So perhaps they did defeat the Goblin King who was working with the Overlord, but the Goblin King wasn't killed. He was an escapee, or he was released, or he was put in prison by the king and forgotten about. Because now is your opportunity to bring together everything that's been forgotten about, everything that's been left behind. You can now bring it together as a 1-2 punch to just emphasize your conclusion, your grand finale that much better. And you'll see where those are going to fit in a little bit later. So if we look at our C's, our 5 C's, and I like to have 5 C's, 5 this, 5 that, because it allows you to kind of literally jot them down on a piece of paper and then just make notes next to them. It kind of helps focus. I'm sure there's lots of other things that you could add on if you like. You'd have the 4 P's or the 7 S's. If they even exist, you can make them up. But I like the 5 C's because they center around the idea of the very first one, which is cool. You've got to make it cool. Now, a lot of people go, wow, what do you mean, make it cool? I mean, it's role-playing, so it's a Star Wars conclusion, or it's a Star Trek finale, or it's a Doctor Who finale, it's high school kids finale, whatever it is. The cool factor references specifically about the setting. So if the characters have spent a year playing around, running around on, say, Death Stars, for example, your conclusion can't be in a Death Star. That's not exciting. That's not cool. They've been there. They've done that. So try and think of spaces, of places, of settings that are cool. Now, if you look at Star Wars, Revenge of the Sith, which we won't go into the type of movie it was, but their conclusion, their final setting, was over giant fields of lava. That was a pretty cool setting, if a completely and utterly implausible one. But that was the idea, was that they were on this lava fields and they had all sorts of dramatic moments and spaces to play in. But that was the idea. And if you think of most adventures and things, the finale must be cool. The location must be cool. So don't just dismiss your location as, oh, well, it's wherever they happen to meet the bad guy. No. You are in charge here. So you're going to set up where they meet the bad guy. And the bad guy is going to be in a cool place. That's something that you've got to do. You've also got to make sure that the way that the rest of the C's work together is cool. And you're going to see how we're going to have to do that as we come back to the other C. So let's go to another C. We're going to go now to chaos. The final section, the final finish of this whole thing should be chaotic. It should be this grand ball of insanity that rolls over the players, that rolls around the players, that just pushes everybody in this finale that is so chaotic, that is so full of make this check, change that, challenge this, do that, overcome this. This now happens. That explodes. This is crumbling. You've got to get there. You've got to make it chaotic. And the idea of chaos, for me, is best represented in Star Wars Return of the Jedi. The film literally has a 40-minute concluding battle sequence. That's phenomenal. Apart from movies that focus on just a battle, that's one of the longest battle sequences ever in film history. 40 minutes of a feature film, which is not about battle, by the way. 40 minutes is spent on battle. And the space battle is pure chaos. Things are flying in from here, they're flying in from there. There's ships over there, there's ships here, there's just ships everywhere. It's chaos, things are blowing up. It's all over the place. That's juxtaposed, and this is part of chaos, that's juxtaposed with quiet sneaking through a forest. With cold, political, emotional manipulation happening on the Death Star. So that's something that you want to try and work into your chaos. Chaos is only chaotic if there are moments of calm and incredible tension, and then broken with chaos and violence and combat and all sorts of weird and wonderful and fantastic things. So that's what you want to work in, is your chaos factor. Now again, bring back the cool. How are you going to make the minions that these characters have been fighting for session after session after session, how are you going to make them cool? Has the Grand Duke now mechanically altered the direwolves so that they're now mechanical direwolves with 6 legs and spikes? Are there lasers on the heads of the sharks? How are you making this chaos cool? Are there armies behind your PCs that are fighting other armies that are sweeping down the hills, and suddenly there's a counterattack and the players have to try and figure out how to manage that before everyone gets overrun? Chaos and cool. Next, contingent. Contingent is quite literally, if this happens, then that happens. If this happens, then that happens. You have to have contingencies, both for the players' characters as well as for your grand finale. So, contingency might be that the character base has to split. And again, I'm going back to Star Wars Return of the Jedi. We have our party splits into 3. One goes down to the planet to destroy the shield generator that protects the Death Star, that the other group is attacking. Their attack, however, the beginning part of it, requires as much chaos as possible so that the stealth mission is undetected to a relative degree. Then finally, one of the party members has split away, so the party is split in 3, has split away to go and deal with the actual political disaster, the family tragedy that's busy playing out. So we've split into 3. And if any one of those 3 doesn't succeed, the whole thing is over. If the stealth mission doesn't destroy the shield generator, the starships can't attack the Death Star. If the Death Star attack fails, destroying the shield generator is irrelevant. If the character on the Death Star succumbs to the dark side, the whole battle is a complete waste of time. If that character, however, is still on the Death Star, once the other 2 things have happened, they die. The whole thing blows up in this most spectacular, honorable death that could possibly be imagined. Now, of course, that didn't happen, but the contingency idea is that you've got this contingency. This must happen, then that will happen. This must happen, otherwise that will happen. In your grand conclusion, in your grand finale, you've got the chaos factor, you've got the cool factor, but you've got to have the contingency factor. Try and split up the party. It will make things a lot more dramatic, a lot more tension-filled. By having this party, you have to make sure that you unlock that portcullis. You have to make sure that this happens, and you have to make sure that that happens. And if any one of those falls down, the whole thing is going to appear to come to a grand and final solution. Now that's exactly what happened in Star Wars Return of the Jedi. The characters on the planet, their stealth mission, appeared to go completely wrong when they got captured. And as a matter of fact, that information was relayed back to the single character with the Emperor, who then used it to try and convert that person even more. Your friends on the Endor moon have failed. It was I who allowed the Rebel Alliance to know the location of the shield generator, etc., etc., etc. So they were arrested, and now suddenly our whole contingency becomes that much more tense, because now they've got to get out of the prison, out of being arrested, and still save the day whilst the big battle is happening up in the sky and everyone is dying. So contingency makes it much more interesting. But also part of contingency is the idea that you have to be able to have alternative solutions if the contingency fails. If the Death Star shield generator was never destroyed, can someone in a spaceship fly into it onto the planet surface and destroy it as a backup? So there's an honorable sacrifice for one of your players who can now fly their starship into this structure and cause it to end. Is there a player who can charge on their rhinoceros directly into the center of the tower to cause it to collapse, thus destroying the mages who are preventing the army from invading the castle? Is there some kind of contingency that you've built in that the players can become aware of should they fail to achieve their initial contingencies? Now, your villain should also have some contingencies. Not a lot, mind you. This is the end. This is the conclusion. So your big bad enemy, whatever it is not going to escape. So their contingencies might be, well, I've got troops on the planet's surface. Well, I've got extra guards protecting me, so you'll never get close to me. So they can have contingencies. But again, the idea here is more about contingencies for the players and their actions. Again, you want to bring in the cool factor. How do you make it cool? How do you make those contingencies cool? This one leads to that one, leads to the next one. Each of those locations, each of those things that has to happen should be cool. It shouldn't just be a case of open the doors. That's not very cool. However, if those doors are a living beast that needs to be slain in order for the doors to be open, or perhaps those doors open over a 10,000-foot precipice, and the characters have to somehow get across. Again, it's about bringing in that cool factor, as well as bringing in the chaos factor. Each of those three little components had a severe amount of chaos that needs to be brought in. The battle, the sneaking, the political side of things, there needs to be that chaos factor to keep it going. Next, catastrophic. This goes with contingency to a degree, and it's important that we know about contingency because now we need to make sure that each of those steps, each of those phases is as catastrophic as possible. If you do not succeed in that, this is over. If you fail in defeating the big bad, the world is over. It must be catastrophic. Now, it doesn't have to be on a galactic scale. It doesn't have to be this world-ending event. It could just be that the village and all the orphans die horribly. It depends on the scale of your campaign. But it must be catastrophic. The odds must be as at the furthest and highest point possible. Failure results in the death of the PCs. Success results in the death of the big bad. That is the catastrophic level that it must be. But what we often forget to do is we often forget to impress upon our players the catastrophic nature. Here you've got NPCs, saying to the players, if we don't get this right, we're all dead men. We must succeed. If we do not, the grand evil will be so powerful that no force on earth will be able to stop them. We have no choice but to commit everything. You as the GM must drive home the catastrophic scale, the catastrophic implications of failure in this final moment. If you just go, yeah, well, if we kill him, we kill him. If we don't, there'll always be tomorrow. Well, that's exactly how the players will take it as well. There's always a tomorrow when we can, try and defeat him again, or we'll go back in time. Time travel, for me, is one of the reasons where the catastrophic nature is completely removed. It's not catastrophic if you can just go back in time and fix it. You just keep going backwards in time and fixing it until eventually you've fixed it. So the catastrophic nature is not so much there, for me anyway. So the idea is you bring in catastrophic consequences. And again, those catastrophic consequences can be cool. If the Dark Lord succeeds, everybody gets turned into mutants because he's releasing this ray that will just turn the entire planet into a bunch of mutants, who unfortunately are only stable for 24 hours until they explode in a big puddle of slimy goo. However you want it. So bring in that cool factor into that catastrophic nature. And then finally, and this is the most impossible, this is the most important part, and obviously the part that's the most obvious as well, is you need to deal with your climax. Your climax must be climatic. And again, I know that goes without saying, but so often GMs have the big bad and their players all rush in, and because of the magical items, because of the planning of the players, because of how it's all been set up, they slay the big bad and it's done in about 3 rounds. That's awfully boring. Remember, it's got to be cool. It's got to be catastrophic. It's got to be chaotic. It has to have that. And it must be contingent. So once they've got to the big bad, there should still be more things on top of that. They skewer him, and then he still rises again because he's now managed to make himself undead. So this weapon has no impact on him. However, if they can get to his phylactery, which is on this pedestal on the other side of the room, they can destroy that and then kill him. before he can do something, then that makes it that much more interesting. How is it cool? The setting must be cool. The reactions of the creatures around him. You're now bringing in those components that the players have forgotten about from 6 months ago. You're now bringing in those NPCs that the players didn't confront, or the loose ends that they know about and they never did anything about it. You're bringing those things in. As they go to kill the big bad, suddenly this orcish warrior steps in front. You failed to destroy me when we had battle. Now I have returned to seek my honor. And then he attacks, keeping one of the group busy. The rest of the group have to go around this side. But now there's that gnome that no one remembered to pay, or there was this, or there's that. It doesn't even have to be that. It could be they move around the corner. There's a magical item that they forgot about. They move around the corner. The big bad has discovered one of their weaknesses. So freezes that one in place for X amount of rounds, or duration of combat, whatever the system you might be using. So the climax needs to then bring all of those components together, all your contingencies, all of your chaos, all of your catastrophic setting, catastrophic levels, all of that now gets brought in to this climax. And you've got to make it as cool as possible. So those are the 5 C's that I use. Those are the things that I try and incorporate into my game to make them as climatically finale-esque as possible. And when you watch, say, The Return of the Jedi, once they've destroyed the shield generator, the starships go in, they start destroying the starship. At the same time, there's this massive family, emotional, political thing playing out inside of it. Do they get out just before the starship, before the base station blows up, before the Death Star blows up? Well, maybe they do, but they've got to rush, and they've got to do this, and they've got to do that. And it just all comes together in one fantastic finale, which if you can do, your players will be talking about for years to come. They really will be, because it'll be just so spectacular. Hit that like button if you like what you saw. Hit the subscribe button if you want to join us for weekly episodes that get released. And welcome to the show if you haven't seen it before. If you don't know where to go and look at stuff, find us on Twitter at #HowToGM. Find us on the web at www.greatgamemaster.com. Join others at tables around the world, both online and in real life, at www.rpgtablefinder.com, which is our exclusive homemade grouping table finding system thing that we've set up. But in general, have fun. Join us in this amazing hobby, wherever you happen to be, and however you happen to do it, whether it is online or in real life. Until next time, I wish you and yours the happiest of games.